Once you begin a project or project template, you want to ensure that the electrical settings are adjusted to match preferences and company standards. Revit has electrical settings which control a variety of analysis and graphic display settings. You can access the electrical settings by clicking the dialog launcher on the electrical panel. You can also access the electrical settings from the Manage ribbon in the Settings panel by expanding the MEP Settings button and selecting Electrical Settings. In this dialog, the various settings appear in the pane on the left in a tree structure. When you select a setting on the left, the available options populate in the pane on the right. The first settings are for hidden lines. Here, you can select whether or not to draw MEP hidden lines when objects cross in two-dimensional views. Then you can control the line style by clicking in the Value field and expanding the drop-down. Additionally, you can control the inside and outside gaps along with the single line gap. Next, I'll click General to switch to those options. Here, you can enter a symbol for the electrical connector separator. When you click in the Electrical Data Style Value field, you can expand the drop-down and choose one of the options to meet your preferences. Additionally, you can select one of the available circuit description options and then enter a character or text for any of the three circuit naming by phase labels. You can also click in the Capitalization for Load Names Value field and select From Source Parameters, Initial, Sentence, or Upper. Moving on, you can control the angles for cable tray and conduit routings and wiring settings. Next, I'll select Voltage Definitions. In this table, you can modify the existing voltage definitions by adjusting the value and minimum and maximum voltages, or by adding a new voltage definition. You cannot delete any of the default definitions, but if you create additional voltage definitions, you can delete them if needed. Similarly, for distribution systems, you can modify the existing definitions or add additional distribution system definitions as needed. The phase can be single or three-phase. The configuration can be set to Y or delta if it is three-phase. For wires, you can set the number to 3 or 4 with three-phase systems and 2 or 3 with single-phase systems. Lastly, the LL voltage can be set to any of the voltages listed in the voltage definitions to represent the voltage measured between any two phases, and the LG voltage can be set to represent the voltage measured between a phase and ground. You can also adjust cable tray settings and conduit settings here in the Electrical Settings dialog. When you select Load Calculations, there are two buttons and a checkbox. The Load Classifications button opens the Load Classifications dialog. Here, you can control the demand factor and select the load class for use with spaces for the various load classification types. I'll click Cancel to close the dialog. The Demand Factors button opens the Demand Factors dialog. Here, you can control the calculation method and calculation options for the various demand factor types. Once again, I'll click Cancel to close this dialog. The checkbox is to turn on Run Calculations for loads in spaces. As you can see, calculations of loads on spaces may slow system response, and you can turn off active calculations to improve performance. Finally, in the Panel Schedules settings, you can control the spare label and space label. You can also select whether or not to include spares in panel totals, or merge multipoled circuits into a single cell.